Hello everyone, I'm hoping that you can hear me. This is Alistair Lewis from the UKBIMA South group. We have got people joining us at the moment, and I'm going to let them just carry on going up a little bit just for a minute, and then we will get started. So just bear with us just for one moment, if that's okay. If you have any sound issues at all, then please use the chat and just let us know if you're having any trouble listening or seeing the slides. Okay, so let's get going. So hello everyone, welcome to this session from the UK BIM Alliance South group. We're delighted to have paired up with the BSI again for this session, which talks about BIM and Clients. I am the head of technology at Air Chamberlain Gaunt, which is an architectural practice based in London and Basingstoke. And I've been the chair of the South group for the last couple of years now. I think we've been running this for a period of time. So just to go through the agenda today, I'm going to do a very brief welcome, so you won't hear much from me, but you will hear a lot more from Dan Rossiter, who I'm really pleased to have talking today about clients and ISO 19650. He'll go through that for you. We'll then talk about the digital client and what that looks like from Keith Deeney, who's a BIM expert from Stride Glowen. And then we've got Olufemi Alea talking about Portsmouth City Council's strategic case study, which hopefully you'll find really engaging and interesting as a client in the southern region who are really engaging with BIM and what that looks like for themselves. And then I will do a very quick summary, and we will then have a question and answer session. You are welcome to ask questions throughout, and we will try and assign them to the speakers, and they may be able to get back to you during their sessions. Or the more kind of weighty ones we'll leave to the end and we'll run through then. If you are on Twitter, then please use BIM Clients as a hashtag. We are going to be tweeting things through the UK BIM Alliance South handle, which is at the bottom of the screen now. And also you've got the Twitter handles for the speakers today as well. So just in terms of the South group, very brief introduction. If you haven't been here before, we've been holding these events for the last 6 years now and have had a number of different and varied events. And we're really pleased to continue that with what we've been doing now. The last event for the ISO 19650 had over 300 people attend, which was really great reach for us. And these online events, I think, are engaging with a larger audience each time, which is really good. We are collaborating with BSI today, but we have done so with Constructing Excellence. And if you're part of a group or an organisation that would like to get involved with us and hold an event or get some support, then please get in touch with me or Keith, and we can help and try and support you with that. As I say, we are a forum for practitioners and professionals in the southern region. We support the main UK BIM Alliance group as a regional area covering the south, and these events will be kind of continuing over the next few months. We're going to have the next event later in the year, probably in September, October time. So please get in touch if you do have any questions for us. So I am delighted to introduce Dan to talk to you about his talk on ISO 19650. I'm going to let him introduce himself to you and let him get going. So welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Alistair, and thank you, BIM Region South, for having me. Morning, everyone. Yes, as mentioned, I'm Dan Rossiter from the British Standards Institution. I'm one of our sector leads there. Very briefly, I talk to the people internally within BSI to help them understand how the construction sector works, because obviously we as the British Standards Institution work in all sectors, including medical devices, food, transport and all sorts, as well as construction. And then Similarly, I then engage with industry to help industry understand what BSI does and do. So, pardon me. So for today's talk about bits of the client bits and pieces relating to ISO 19650. I'm not sure if I have control, Asta, because I'm clicking and it's not moving.
Okay, I have got you as controlling keyboard and mouse. I am unsure why that wouldn't be working. Let me just try that again. Okay, can you try again now?
I can make something work. Fab.
Okay.
Thank you. So as part of what we are doing here in the UK, hopefully most of you are now aware of the UK BIM Framework, the overarching standards, guidance and resources that's been developed, procured and curated by the British Standards Institute, the Centre for Digital Build Britain and the UK BIM Alliance as a kind of tripartite who manage and look after it. On the screen here, you can see the current standards that are part of that suite. You'll notice now that 19650 Part 5 has joined the fold, released during this month at the start of July. We now have the security-minded documentation now to go into the suite with everything else. And as we'll see, as things gradually progress, we will have 19650 Part 3 join us later in the year, covering the operational side, to tie together with Part 2 to be able to provide support specifications for the whole life cycle, and work is underway to develop 19650 Part 4, which has gone out for a committee draft for internal review at the moment, and we're expecting it to be published in 2022, although it is progressing and proceeding quite quickly, so those dates may change at some point. But you can see as part of this, we have the UK BIM Framework, and it's a dynamic and evolving list with Part 5 coming out, Part 3 imminent, and other things chopping and changing. The idea is that it persists as what is good practice currently within the UK. Now, as part of this, this talk will focus on part 2, which is looking at the delivery phase, so the brief, design and construction and handover elements of the design process. And what we'll talk about is the role that the client takes. Now, those of you who know me may not know that a lot of my experience in practice was actually on the design side doing a lot of client activities as I worked for my local council for a number of years, delivering projects, writing briefs, doing tendering and overseeing a lot of D&B contracts and those bits and pieces. And as part of that process, we were always interested in a lot of the BIM standards and the design bits, try and tie all this together. And one of the good things about 19650 above PAS 1192 was that PAS 1192 was written for primarily government contracts to try and look at the way that BIM level 2 could be done for central government, whereas 19650 has been designed to be more contract size and form of contract agnostic, so it can work for all types of assets and all sizes of projects. So we have something that's more flexible because it's meant to suit smaller projects as well as those larger projects as well. And the idea is that one of the first things you might notice when you read it is that there are no longer roles in the standard. Within the past documentation, there were things like the project information manager, the task team manager, and those sort of roles. All those have disappeared. And there are many reasons for this. One was the fact that those roles were quite flexible. When reading the standards, you could combine roles, split roles, and move things around, which actually meant that the wrapper of the role was pretty useless. And what we needed to focus on were the responsibilities, and it was actually what tasks those people needed to do as part of this process. So as part of that, then what we're trying to do is to have that focus to make sure that we're concentrating on who does what. And as part of that, the ISO talks about something called the information management function. And the idea being that that function is a number of tasks that need to be done in order to facilitate information management. Part 2 itself has 40 tasks in it. which sounds like a fair bit. But as you go through each task, it tells you who at default should be doing those tasks. So it starts to talk about whether it is for the appointing party, the lead appointed party, or an appointed party. And as part of those 40, there are only 16 that are at default kind of given to the client to undertake. So we're already starting with 40 and we've managed to knock out 24 of these tasks as part of that process. And when you start to look at it, there are even further caveats that say things, for example, that you can actually effectively delegate those to someone else. So for a client with very low maturity, they could just turn around and say, actually, you, Mr. Lead Appointed Party, my tier one, I want you to do everything for me. And as part of the ISO, you can actually just delegate those down. Now, I want to suggest that's probably not a good idea, as quite a lot of these tasks you will already be doing as a client without realizing it. So I would try to keep as many of them as possible on the client side, but just know that there is the option to delegate them down, and that there is a matrix at the back of 19650 Part 2, which can be used to help assign these tasks to different organizations. So it's fully flexible to suit your needs as part of that process. So taking ourselves down to those 16, you'll notice that when you have the breakdown of tasks by when they happen, a lot of it is front loaded. You'll notice that as part of this graph I'm showing, you've got a kind of tealy sort of color that's for the appointing party. And you'll notice that a lot of their tasks are front loaded. It's about trying to establish what are the needs of that client as an organization and tasks that are involved with the tender process. While as for any of the delivery teams, so the tier ones and anyone into part of the supply chain, you'll notice their tasks are moved later on as part of that process. A lot of it during responding to tender and actually producing information. So from a client point of view, a lot of the work is done before you actually bring other organizations onto the project. So it's quite important. A lot of this is sort of done at the back end effectively, or the front end even, as part of this process. But it's quite interesting to see the way that they are distributed as part of that, and that actually during the appointment of the supply chain, there aren't too many information management tasks that a client needs to undertake. Now, what I want to suggest is that of those 16, there's a good bunch of these that a client already does. So they aren't really new tasks as part of this process. The first one here, establishing delivery milestones. Effectively, if you're using a plan of works or setting out key dates for delivery, you are already doing this. Many organizations will use things like the RIBA plan of works, the network rail grip, the OGC gateways, or even have own specific milestones within work stages to suit planning approvals or public consultations and those sorts of things. So those are effectively your information delivery milestones. By sitting there and stating that you need visualizations, drawings, videos, other bits and pieces for public consultation, you are saying that there's information you need by that milestone in order for you to do something. So a lot of that already happens on a day-to-day basis. Things like establishing and assembling the resources. These two tasks, effectively can be combined together. One is working out what they are, the other is putting them together so that you can send them out. And this is doing things like sharing early design drawings with the design and build contractor. This is about finding site condition surveys that have been done historically and presenting them to the organization. It's about identifying that if you want things in IFC, you might want to point to the IFC schema as part of your documentation. It's about signposting people to information that might help them do their work or that has already been produced on the project, which the majority of us already do anyway. 5.2.3, when you talk about the tender response and evaluations, I don't know how a tender can be run if you don't have any form of evaluation criteria, because how else could you mark it? So if anyone is already doing tendering and you're not doing a 100% cost-based tender evaluation scheme, then as part of that, there will be some form of evaluation criteria. which means you are already doing this task already. Compiling tender information, creating a tender package, that all gets done already. Signing appointment documents. We all sign a lot of appointment documents to make sure that people are actually on the project and can do their work. And then those last two being archiving the information model that you received during the project. And traditionally, we might do a lot of that using drawings and have effectively your as-built records and stuff. But that same process of actually taking the information generated during the project and putting it somewhere safe is very much that process. And most of us will also already be following some form of government soft landings, and we'll be looking at capturing lessons learned, or at the very least, if there's been a mistake or a problem on a project, documenting that to make sure that that doesn't happen again. So of these 16, there are at least 8 of them that hopefully everyone is already doing, because I can't remember the last time I saw a project that doesn't have milestones or that didn't compile tender documents and stuff together. So very quickly, we started with 40, we've dropped down to 16, and of those, there are probably only small revisions that might need to be made to a client's quality plan or something similar to actually enable those to work. Because as part of the ISO, it suggests considerations that you should have when you look at these things. Which means then actually there are only maybe 8 of them that are potentially new. And I say potentially because some of these are also probably captured in the way that we already do what we do. Appoint individuals to undertake the information management function. As part of a client's role, there will be this idea of producing scopes of services to enable people to do their work. As part of that, other functions will be being described. Things like the architectural function, some form of maybe structural engineering function and those sorts of things, the project management function. So that idea of actually saying, I need someone to do a scope of work is something that we are quite familiar with. It's just about introducing the tasks that you aren't planning to do as part of your project as such in order to do those. And as part of that, it filters in quite well with the information protocol. So you may have seen on the UK BIM Alliance website that as part of the UK BIM framework, there is the information protocol that's now available, the updated version aligned to ISO 19650. And as part of that, it covers a lot of these tasks in slightly more detail and tries to put them into what I will call legalese for now, and someone may tell me off later. But this idea of actually having them written in a structured way that could suit from a legal and contractual perspective. So a part of this appointment, it's quite important to tie these two things together, because when you start to delegate some of these tasks to other parties, it might actually affect the structure of the protocol, because the protocol will outline the responsibilities of those different parties and what they need to do. So thinking of when you start to discharge them down the supply chain, it may actually change the structure of your protocol itself. But in theory, keeping things as default, it helps structure and connect those things together. Information requirements. Now, this is the one that most people seem to have difficulty with. And when you look at templates for exchange information requirements, or when I'm asked to look at draft versions of exchange information requirements, frankly, a lot of them don't have information requirements within them, which is a surprising thing. An information requirement is when you ask for information that you need to do something. And when you look at these draft EIRs, there's a lot in there on how to structure the naming conventions, how clash detection needs to work, but people aren't actually asking for information. A lot of it is about controlling or structuring information as opposed to requesting it. And this ties me into a small divergence I'll talk about, which was I recently went back to my local authority and did some work with them. They wanted to update their tender documentation because they were starting a new framework and wanted to ensure that a lot of the BIM bits were included within it to make sure that framework as default looked at information management and BIM. They had a standard EIR and a standard set of employees requirements, ERs, that they were using, and they wanted them effectively lined up so their tender documentation worked. When I looked at their documentation, I found their EIR, like many of the others I saw, had no information requirements inside of it at all. But when I started looking at their ERs that effectively went out with the brief, it had lots of things in it, like I've started talking about something that's on another slide, so I will bounce and try and do this in a vaguely professional way. Here we are. So when they started talking about it, we looked at their employees' requirements. It had things in it like contractor required to produce detailed drawings for the complete extent of works, contractor to produce finishes schedules for rooms indicating materials and colours. Those are information requirements. That is the client asking for information from the project team. That is the very definition of what an information requirement is. So once the local authority realised this, then actually it was a case now that there was no such thing as a BIM project anymore, because all projects, they were asking for information, and they could see now that actually what we're trying to do is formalise the information requirements that they're already doing, but through a process that helps them manage and test those as part of their process. So it wasn't about asking for crazy new things, it was just about trying to control the way that they did it. And the way that they were expecting to do it, as I seamlessly go backwards, is through their information exchange information requirements. Now, as part of this process, it's important to note that the exchange information requirements is appointment specific. There should be a set of exchange information requirements per contract. And as a normal project may go, you'll have multiple contracts that take place as part of an overall project. For example, on the slide you can see at the moment, I've put part of the ROBA plan of works on the screen, and you can see that for the duration of the project, going from preparation and brief over to the handover, the idea is that there's a single set of project information requirements, things that that organisation needs to know throughout the duration of the project. However, what would happen, at least in the case that I used to deal with in my local authority, was that you really had 3 separate contracts that took place over that project. The first was during the preparation and brief stage, where actually it was feasibility studies looking at, for example, whether a school should be built, or whether the cost-effective ways of doing those refurbishments. And that was actually an internal appointment, whereby the schools department was effectively contracting our design and development team to look at the feasibility of those schools extensions and refurbishments. And the idea then being is that you could take the project information requirements and filter those down into a set of exchange information requirements that were suitable for that bit of the contract. You know, at that point, there's no point in including requirements relating to planning or public consultation or handover, because it's effectively feasibility work. Following that bit, there's then the early design stages where concept design, spatial coordination, planning, and those sorts of things happen. Again, that one in our situation was typically an internal contract as well, where then the architectural team would be appointed to do the initial design work. And once we'd done that, we would then produce things like the exchange requirements, create a kind of technical brief, do tender documentation, which then would go out for a contractor with a design portion to then do the technical design, build, and hand over the project. And in which case then that's in theory a third set of exchange information requirements, because at that point then it's really about what information you need from the contractor at that stage during technical design, construction, and handover. And the idea is that it's discrete and contract specific each time, because you only want to include what's relevant, as opposed to having the poor design team try to understand what clauses they shouldn't or should provide, because there's for some reason a clause about handover in an EIR that's only meant for the early design stages. And very much this ties in a lot with the briefing and just being able to produce those tight technical briefs as part of that process. Going maybe there. Now, the other part, and the part that many of us are doing mistakenly in our EIRs, this is where we seem to be putting our standards, methods, and procedures. And the idea is that there is a new place to put those. Within ISO 19650, it talks about the idea of an information standard and an information production methods and procedures set out for the project. And stating it's for the project is specific because the idea is there's one set that is added and amended during the process, so that when you have those second and third EIRs, the opportunity is then for the supply chain to go back and suggest additions and amendments to those documentation to ensure that there's consistency across the entire project team in producing this information. And it can include things like which standards should be followed, whether there's a specific room naming convention that should be used, what file formats are required on the project. It includes all those sorts of things that typically people put into the EIR following the old documentation, but it has this new place now as part of that process. And two example clauses you can see here are things like spaces shall be numbered in accordance with BSEN ISO 4157 Part 2, or drawings should be provided in PDF 2.0. And it's those sorts of things that should be put in that documentation. And bearing in mind that I saw that we had some other local authorities and stuff on the call, what I wanted to add was this statement at the bottom, which is if you are procuring under public procurement rules, you shouldn't specify what software people use. And this is due to an issue around the EU directives. Don't ask me how that's going to change in the near future, but due to the competition-based directives, the idea is that you can't have specifications that provide preference to certain economic operators, and the idea is that you should have performance-based specifications as opposed to prescriptive ones. So the idea is you don't say do Revit, you say I want .rvt files, and in which case then if there are innovations or alternatives or people want to use different software, they should be able to flex and provide value for money while still being able to meet that performance-based requirement at the end. So I've included the reference there, but just be mindful that it becomes quite difficult in the same way that you can't say clad my building in Trespa, there has to be an equal or approved or a set of performance specs. The same happens on the digital side, and the same procurement rules tend to apply. Which takes us then to effectively the last two as part of it, which is establishing the common data environment. Now, as part of this process, it ties in very closely with the way that you review, approve, and accept information as part of the overall process. And what's important to note is that the CDE isn't a piece of tech. You can't buy a common data environment. The idea is that the common data environment itself is a process. It's a flow. It's a procedure. I remember people like Mark Bew used to refer to it as a logic train. The idea being that there is a set of gateways that information goes through so that it becomes shared or it becomes published. It doesn't sit in a shared folder in a piece of technology. And because of this, you can have parts of the common data environment in different platforms. You can have it on your local server. The flexibility is there and quite extensive, but the important bit is that process is preserved and maintained across those different solutions that you use. Which also means that you could be using 4 or 5 different common data environment solutions to make it work. And the idea is that you connect all of this together to do that. And as part of that, it's important to make sure that those procedures for the approval and the acceptance process are part of things like the information standard and the information methods and procedures, so that they can be integrated into the workflows people intend to use as part of their common data environment. By tying these things together, it ensures that any technology-based solution that is used should then, as part of the contract, enable those procedures. So if there are certain requirements that you have as a client, for example, in terms of how you want information presented to you so that you can review it, by having them in the project's information production methods and procedures, you can ensure that as part of the contract, the technology should be there to help facilitate that. And really, that's all a client needs to do as part of a contract that's looking at ISO 19650. The idea is that it specifies what should happen during the delivery phase, and that as part of that, it has 40 things that people need to do. And as part of that, only 16 of them are really for the appointing party, effectively the client, to do. At least 8 of those, I'm confident, are stuff that you as clients already do, which leaves then those final 8, many of which you may already do. But hopefully what we're helping to show here is that there isn't such a thing as a BIM project. There's no such thing as BIM data. None of these things really exist because we already ask for information. We already require information. We already approve, review, and sign off information as part of, if you want to call them, traditional projects. All we're doing as part of these standards is helping to formalize the way those activities get undertaken to ensure that they do get done as part of that process. And depending on your organization, its nature and its maturity, you may actually want to push a lot of that onto the supply chain, in which case that's perfectly okay. The ISO has been structured in a way that allows you to delegate those requirements down, but hopefully as part of this presentation, you've seen that a lot of it isn't really new and isn't that different. So I would hope that you'd want to adopt and keep those tasks within your own organization to maintain the control over them, particularly when it comes to things like producing information requirements and the standards, methods, and procedures that support the project. I think having that control and keeping that control internally is important to facilitate that. But from a big scary document down to potentially 8 new things you need to do, hopefully that gap doesn't look as big following this presentation. Thank you.
Dan, fantastic. Thank you very much for that. That's really helpful and really, really clear. I think that's a lot of people should have benefited from that. I am going to move us forward on to Keith, who is going to talk about the digital client. I'm just going to make sure he has control over the slides. Just bear with me one moment. Okay, so I will let Keith introduce himself and carry on. Just check if you can change the slides, Keith. If you can, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think I've got control. Thanks, Alistair. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Obviously, thank you, Dan. That was really informative. My name is Keith Deeney. I'm co-chair of the UKBIMA South with Alistair. Although I began in architecture, so I'll just a bit of background about myself. I started doing information modelling quite a long time before it was BIM, and then sort of as it evolved into BIM, I started doing education and working with clients and other consultancy firms. I now am part of Trudge and I'm a consultant there, working sort of internally and externally. Externally, I tend to work a lot with our existing clients and also with new clients to help them kind of realize potentials that are within BIM and sort of digital transformation. So I wanted to sort of focus on that bit today, really. So we are finding that clients are a lot more digitally aware now, sort of over the last sort of 2 to 3 years, particularly that obviously the evolution of BIM has sort of filtered down, and that sort of clients now are becoming aware of that. We tend to find that that's probably initially brought about because of a catalyst, a project, say, that might happen, and that catalyst is part of that change. But what we're also trying to get from clients is what their understanding is and what else that they can gain from that as part of the benefits that could be for them, and what other aspects of the information modeling could influence, particularly say like post handover, for example, that although information modeling is quite based around design, construction, probably more traditionally, that actually for a client it's more about possibly what is being handed over at the end of the project. So this leads clients we find to have a series of sort of aims or drivers of what they might want to get out of information modeling that sits aside from the standard design construction type processes. So I really want to kind of focus on clients that we've worked with in a consultative way, and have tried to pull out of something the BIM process that sits aside from the standard clash detection, collaboration, and the kind of design and build processes. In terms of these sort of aims and drivers, then what these then tend to start formalizing is a series of requirements that a client might have that sits outside of that, and there's considerations that they might be. So I wanted to kind of focus on some of those. For example, you might have a new build. That's obviously going to be a BIM level 2 project, but for a client, it could be about the data that's being handed over at the end of that. So what does that look like? What are those requirements that the client might have? And how can we sort of wrap those up into a series of considerations that the client then might understand and start listing, a little bit like Dan was just saying, from the ISO 650 point of view, that clients are now becoming a lot more aware of what information requirements are. Hopefully Dan's presentation will help some of that. But I think also it's trying to give clients the understanding that BIM particularly isn't just about design and construction. It's about what sits beyond that. So we're finding that there's also many other influences at the moment that may sit alongside that with a client. For example, the Hackett report, the idea of having a kind of golden thread of information, safety related asset information that sits outside of the kind of standard BIM process. There is the kind of traditional single source of truth as well, that the part of the point of BIM in the first instance really was to have a kind of single model that you could have everything inside of, rather than lots of disparate parts of information that make up a design and construction. So I think that's really key for a client still. But then pushing that across over into life cycle and asset planning, and I think that's really where clients are sort of seeing the benefit of this, particularly when it comes to operational budgeting, and then into sort of plan preventive maintenance and management and so on. That again in turn really leads to things like CAFM solutions. Again, we're finding that over the last 2 to 3 years, FM teams, operational teams are really now starting to look at whether their standard facilities management processes are sort of good enough, but also using the kind of BIM process to really act as that kind of catalyst to update some of those systems and look at how they can utilize a model that's being handed over. Strategic investment as well, decision making, and obviously using the kind of empirical data that's there to help with performance into the life cycle of a building. In the design and construction process, there is also obviously the actual just communication, that from a client point of view, I think it does really help the buy-in with what that design intent is, and also give people the ability to kind of see what their design intent is based around, rather than the kind of traditional sort of 2D sort of drawings and so on. And I think finally the obviously supply chain as well and outcomes, I think, can really be a lot more standardized, contractual documentation, and obviously again that kind of crosses over to what Dan was just sort of getting in his presentation. So I just wanted to use a couple of example projects to sort of outline exactly what I was talking about there. So the first one I wanted to focus on was the Museum of London project. So we got involved in this as my role was technical advisor to the client, very early stage. We were fortunate enough to that the client was really engaged with the process, and they really wanted to look at how that they could use the BIM process to help what they was going to get out of the project. I got involved sort of pre-stage 0, and although we weren't involved from the architectural side of it, this was solely for consultancy. The Museum of London were relocating. They were going from their existing location to a new location in London. There was a big refurbishment project as part of that. Obviously, that was a BIM level 2 project. So they were already doing all of the modeling, the surveying, all of the other stuff that kind of goes with that. What they really wanted to understand is that, well, firstly, they wanted to understand all those processes a bit more, but also out of those, what could they kind of capitalize on to really assist some of the internal things that they were already undergoing. So they already had their existing location. They already had quite a lot of existing data, facility management, that sort of thing. They also had collection data as well, and they really wanted to sort of see how things like, say, space planning in the new building could be influenced by what they were doing, and how they could maybe move their existing data that was quite sort of separate systems at the moment into something that was more contained. So the requirement really there was sort of looking at possibly upgrading some of their existing systems. One of the key considerations with that was timeframes. The little graphic that I put on there was something that I worked through with the client to try and understand where some of those existing considerations were, and what the timeframes were. So some of the timeframes quite tight when it come to, there was obviously the new refurbishment that was going on. So there was surveys that needed to be undertaken there, data capture. So it was a case of working with the client to understand the specification of those, what exactly the data was needed for that new build. There was areas within that new build that were being stripped out, so less important. But there were also areas that was going to be remaining. So there was a dome roof that particularly that was going to be utilised and raised up, so that had to be scanned to quite a high level of information and detail. So the timeframes of that, and then the data receiving that, and how the client was going to be able to utilise that, and understand that, but also obviously the actual BIM, the modelling that was being undertaken by the contractor and supply chain, where that was going to be housed and how that was going to be used, and also about the data migration that the clients would then receive at the end of that project, how that was being migrated into their existing systems, and then their existing systems, how they could update those as well, to integrate with what they was going to be receiving. So that was about CDEs potentially, or CAFM solutions, of which again we sort of work through the clients with all those different solutions they could go through. The Met Office data center, so this was a really interesting one. So we did the architecture within this, did BIM level 2, and a handover to a good level of sort of BIM. But the client also wanted to look at the data management. It was a very data heavy type of project, because of the fact that it was a data center. So it had a lot of equipment inside of it. So the client really wanted to look at particularly the handover process and what they were going to get as a series of deliverables, and then really ensure that the data that was contained within that, so I put there kind of PIM to AIM, so that the kind of data containers that was there in that asset information model, and what was going to be contained in that asset information model, how they were going to receive that, what again kind of what CAFM solution they might use, and how we could kind of ensure that the migration of the data that was going to be handed over could then be used in longevity for them as a client, and really just trying to formalize that into initially a strategy, and then a series of really quite finite sets of requirements for the data management process. So UE we've worked with a lot over the years. They are very, very digitally aware now. That they've kind of worked their FM team has really worked hard in the last few years to work up what they're calling a digital campus. I'll come back onto that in a little bit in a moment. I've got another slide to cover that. But the one I wanted to focus here was the Frenchy campus that we worked with them on. So this we approached in a very different way, and actually led us to a kind of create a whole new sort of approach, which we're referring to as kind of retro BIM. This was very much more focused on space utilization and creative reuse of the buildings that was already there. So they had this existing campus. They had a degree of it already modelled, but not particularly to a very high level of detail. But it wasn't really about the modelling. There was no new build. There was no high level modelling being done. There was no scanning or scan to BIM solutions that we were suggesting as part of this. We just did a very low level set of modelling. The really key part of this was actually trying to understand the current space usage and where there was inefficiencies within that, where possibly redesigned areas could benefit those existing buildings. This then led to a series of, well, we had a lot of data acquisition. So it was about the rooms that sit inside the modelling. So you obviously can see that there was a model there, but actually that was just sort of walls and floors and things. It was the rooms that sat inside of those. Within those rooms that we then put things like occupancy data, people checking in and out of rooms, where lectures were being held, and so on, and how much usage those different rooms were having. So once we'd acquired all that data and sort of manipulated it, it was then a case of understanding how we might then manipulate that data to then inform how we could redesign some of those areas. So eventually it led to us actually in the architectural side of it coming up with a series of design options, and the graphic at the bottom there is an area that was an external walkway and had two facades to the buildings. Those got redesigned, redeveloped with some new frontages on, and then a roof put over the top to make it then an internal space and a new hub to really kind of rejuvenate that central space. But that will come about obviously by acquiring the data in the first place and manipulating that around the model. Chichester, so Chichester University we worked with, and there was a new tech park building going in, which we did the architecture for. But again, the client was very engaged in what they could get out of that building that sat aside from the kind of standard sort of design and construction process. They had a lot of philanthropists and investors, and they wanted to see if they could use the modelling to give those investors a kind of feel for what they were investing in. And so we sort of went to some investment meetings and went through that engagement process with them using VR. So we upgraded the modelling to really sort of capture the look of the building and what they was going to be getting. And then we, probably more importantly, from the investors, we then used it for the influx of the new students that was coming in. So we went to a lot of open days, I think sort of eight or 10 in the end, set up some really big screens, took a lot of VR equipment with us, and then had lots of the students come in and just basically, move around the space, look at what they was going to be going in as a new building. And at that time, the new building was literally just some piles in the ground, but it really kind of gave us the ability to give those students a feel for where that new building was going to be, what the spaces were going to be like, where the canteen was, or what the rooms were going to be like. The tech building itself was going to be for a visual studios, so there was some studio buildings in there, and it was for the cinematography and that sort of side of things. So they was really interested in what those studios were going to be like, where the sound boxes were, and how big space they was going to have as that studio. So they became really engaged, and it was really interesting to have that kind of younger generation sort of get engaged in that and really sort of really see with the technology, you know, what they could go into as their potential influx of new students. And then, yeah, University West of England, so UE, as I sort of alluded to earlier, that obviously we've worked a lot with them. This was a new build, so this was Faculty for Business and Law, and this building really acted as a bit more of a catalyst for UE to then really upgrade their wider FM systems. So the estates team, like I was saying earlier, really have pushed hard to take the modelling that they're doing internally, take the modelling that they're getting produced as part of new build processes like this, to really upgrade their internal systems, and probably moreover than that, make sure that what they're receiving contains everything that they want for their estates management. They worked with us to then really look at CAFM solutions. I think they were Archibus in the end, and really look at the kind of data requirements that could be, and how that migration of data in those different projects could be pushed across to really run that estate. And as I say, now they've kind of reached the point where they've got a really high level digital campus that they can move around in 3D space. All of the buildings are modeled up, and they're really using that data on a continuous basis to kind of empirically inform the different wider strategies that they've got for life cycle management. We find that all of these clients' aspirations really kind of fall into one of three processes of digitalization. The first one is just digitization, the second one being digitalization, and then the third being digital transformation. So whether they are one of these or a combination of them or all three, it kind of works as a sort of hierarchy as well. That digitalization is really moving from something analog to digital. So that could be taking legacy 2D data, basic hand drawings, for example, into 2D drawings or CAD or 3D databases. It could be taking lever arch files into a CAFM solution. Digitalization is then really sort of moving that forward, probably, and using digital technologies to change some of that. So again, with things like, say, CAFM solutions, it might be about whether they're cloud-based with common data environments. Obviously, again, they're cloud-based solutions, really trying to use technology to manipulate and enhance those different solutions. Also, we're finding that things like APIs allow, obviously, a lot more connection. So sort of another part of my role really is looking at automations and things like APIs to connect different bits of software and really get things like data to shift between different bits of softwares, be it from a design and build process to a CAFM solution or something else. And then digital transformation is that kind of final one that's really then talking about a cultural shift, a change in the way leadership is thinking, which then is really about a sort of strategy for change, and really looking at cross-functional teams as well, and how that can really influence the business itself. All of these different digital changes are all really about data, and I think really that's the key, that once a client really understands the importance of data, that they can then really begin to appreciate how they might better manipulate it and manage it to connect different aspects of the business. The Office of National Statistics little graphic there is just talking about obviously data being really important now. And I mean, obviously too small to probably see some of the graphics, but it's just talking about the amount of data we now use day to day. And I think from a client point of view, that's really critical. To really better understand that data and that digital transformation process, we then work with clients and try and start working on a strategic approach and whether they've got a catalyst of a new project or an existing project or a refurbishment, or whether it's talking about space utilization. Depending on those catalysts, obviously depend on the influence and the approach that we might have, but generally it tends to form into a strategic approach of some sort, and we tend to sort of wrap that up into a digital strategy. Alongside that, we sort of work with the client to understand timeframes that strategy might have, different investment drivers they've got, key stakeholders that are going to be influencing that sort of digital transformation process. Existing systems that sit inside of their current business. So do they have FM systems? Do they have a VMS? Could that be linked to that? Do they have other systems that they might want to link to that? HR, resources, etc. Linking all those different data sets together as well. So the storage and management of that, and then what their current IT systems are as well, and hardware, software, and different security and cloud systems. The current business situation as well is obviously really kind of key to any kind of strategy that we work with a client on. What's their current position? What do they have? Several buildings, offices? Do they have portfolios? What the team hierarchy and structure is within their business, and who's responsible for any kind of business change. Evolutions within the history of the business as well. Change management. Do they have a new BMS system that's just been put in, or is that due for a change? So, trying to understand all of those different things is really kind of key to sort of starting to form out a comprehensive digital strategy before a client kind of starts moving forward with some of those things. Existing knowledge within inside of the business as well. It may be that they're quite digital savvy, or it might be that BIM is a whole new thing to them. So sometimes it's just trying to give them an understanding about what and how things of different aspects of BIM and digital are possible. Documentation, standardization, and digital data management. And then finally, really talking about future-proofing and future thinking, helping clients now realize that some of the other future benefits they could gain from embracing digitalization. Technology is obviously moving on extremely fast at the moment, and things like modern methods of construction, zero carbon are really key players at the moment in design and construction, but also huge plethora of existing buildings that need to be redeveloped. Obviously, what's happened in recent times have meant that things like our high street are massively changing. So what will that mean to redevelopment projects and what we refer to as kind of retro BIM? Obviously, digital twinning again is something that I'm involved in, and obviously the digital prototyping that kind of enables for clients, and that kind of visualization and analytics as well to be able to capture data, empirically understand the data that they have, and then use that to create informed decisions over a life cycle of a project. Also utilizing the kind of digitalization of things like data sciences, things like coding and programming are becoming obviously far more mainstream, and generative design as well. And then lastly, connectivity as well. So things like the Internet of Things, connected sensors and so on, and really trying to use information that's being informed by the buildings around them to link into new systems that they might be putting in place. And that's me. Thank you.
Keith, thank you very much for that. That's really, really helpful, and it's great to see so many good case studies there for the work that you're completing in the South, mainly, I think, as well. So it's really good to see such regional experience, which is really brilliant. So the last speaker we have today is Femi, who's going to be talking about the work he's doing at Portsmouth City Council, and I'm delighted that he's able to come and talk to us about this today. I've handed over the control of the mouse to him now, so hopefully he will be able to take things forward from here.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep, that's all good, thanks.
All right, then. Hello, everyone. My name is Femi Olaya. Thanks for having me today. I work for Portsmouth State Council, and I'm the BIM lead for the council and the architectural design manager. And I've been with the council for about 8 years now. And in my journey with the council since 2012, I have worked in the FMC department, facilities management department. And in 2016, I started doing architecture. And in 2018, I added the BIM role to what I currently do. And I've got a background in architecture, and I've got about 8 years public sector experience. And when I'm not doing architecture or BIM, I am an architecture photographer outside of my 9-to-5 job. So I work within the regeneration directorate in the council, which has about 400 plus strong staffs, and we have about 7 services and 24 teams. And our vision is to create an enabling environment to encourage economic growth, to build on cultural development, and to make Portsmouth a great city to work and live in. And this ties into the corporate vision of the council as a whole. And my department is part of the 7 services that the Regeneration Directorate offers. And my department actually represents the council as its development arm. So we do all the development for the councils, we deliver all the projects basically. And what we do generally is to explore regeneration and development opportunities that benefit the council and meets the requirements of the people. So within my department generally, we offer about 5 services, which BIM is one of them. So we do lots of regeneration scheme, and one of the regeneration scheme we're doing is the TIPNA project. Some of you might know about that, which is about one of the largest regeneration projects in the south of England at the moment. And our development program delivery, what we do there is we identify all sites within Portsmouth, and we try to see which sites are of importance that we can use for development to meet our demands, housing demands, and whatever construction projects that needs to go on. We also have our city center projects that we are doing, which ties into the commercial site development. And we've got a project management office, which we use to structure how all our documentation is being done, which is something that will be rolled out all across the council in the next coming months. And we've got BIM. We identified the need for BIM in 2018 because of all the projects that are coming through, and we decided to take a bold step in doing all of that and making sure we can deliver our projects a lot faster and save money in every way we can, and also to improve on collaboration within project teams. So digital transformation for us is very important. That is why we're taking a bold step in adopting BIM as part of our processes in all the projects we are doing. So we are actually very passionate about technology. We are trying to achieve an environment that will significantly improve project outcomes and end user expectations. And this is all about adding value for us. We are trying to add value in every way possible. And we're trying to improve our processes, how we work, because currently we have a multidisciplinary team within the council that from architectural departments to structural teams, and we have a complete team basically. So we're trying to use BIM to add value to how we currently work. And the driver for us is because we're a public organization and we believe we have the potential to drive change, not just in Portsmouth, but at a regional level, because we can use our procurement rules and legislations to add value in the construction sector. And we are asset owners. We own about 17,000 properties, and we feel adopting BIM will be a good idea to help us understand our assets a lot better and help us save costs in every way we can. And we're also property developers, which is what my department is doing. And in the last 5 years, we have delivered about 230 properties within the council, which is not a lot, but at the moment we have identified quite a lot of sites, and these sites will be moving forward in the next few years, and we'll be able to see results from that. And we also have a housing demand to deliver about 18,000 housing units by 2036. And we believe all of these factors has helped us narrow down to the fact that we need a different approach and a different process to be able to accomplish our goals a lot quicker and in a more intelligent manner. And our greatest challenge has been the fragmented nature of the organization. We have various departments doing their stuff to deliver their projects, but everybody is doing it in a completely different way. And also, the main issue also is the cost of adopting BIM versus the value the BIM is actually going to create for the council. Because when I started talking to people about BIM, they always mentioned the cost, and we felt there's a need for us to look into all of that. So we devised a strategy to see how we can bring all the departments together to start working in a more unified manner, in a collaborative way that would help the council deliver their projects in a more efficient manner. So the strategy for us has been from when we identified BIM in 2018. We started with an awareness workshop, and we did a staff capability survey to understand where people are with BIM and their understanding of BIM. And in 2019, we started to implement BIM, and we had a roadmap for about 4 to 5 years to see how we can digitally transform everything we do. So in that year, what we did was we had a project viability assessment on our long list of sites and potential projects we have, just to list them in an order of priority and the projects that are BIM worthy. And the whole idea of that is to raise the profile of BIM within the council and to prove its benefits across the council. And interestingly, we've got buy-ins from the directors in the council and the assistant directors and team leaders. So this is going very well so far. And this year we set up the BIM working group to help build on that. And we have organized quite a lot of team-focused workshops. We've broken them into bite-sized workshops that won't bore people. And we've broken this into 3 parts, which is planning and procurement, design and delivery, and facilities management, for us to have for each and every one of these people that fall in this category to have a good understanding of their roles and responsibilities within the process. And so we've created a 5-phased approach, which is the first approach is the business case and BIM awareness. We identified what we need and what we require at the end of every project. So we did a business case, identified all our needs, and at the moment we're on the pilot project. So currently we have about 5 projects being done to BIM standards, and we can actually monitor these projects and measure its benefits, and we'll see what we can learn from. And the third phase is digitizing Portsmouth. Portsmouth is about 40 kilometers square in size, and we're already talking to a company who's going to help us build our ordnance survey maps into 3D formats. So this can help our planning team make more informed decisions when they're doing planning. So we can do our planning in a 3D environment and all of that. And we can also, this can also plug into our smart city processes, which is in the making at the moment, and our asset management processes as well. And by the end of 2022, we are hoping we would have delivered a project or 2, and we can apply for an organization-wide BIM accreditation. So this takes me to some of the projects we've got going at the moment. And the very first one of this project is Arundel Street. Arundel Street is a 22-story residential development in the heart of the city. This is on the high street, and what we've is at River Stage 4 at the moment. So we picked this up from River Stage 4. So works have been done before we identify the need for BIM. So what we've done basically is we've carried out a viability assessment on this project to see if it's going to be BIM worthy, which it is BIM worthy. And because of its complexity, and because we manage our properties ourselves, we feel we need to put in place an asset information requirement that would help the FM guys understand the property a lot better and have a strong hold on how they're going to be managing the property. So we established our information requirements. That's the EIR, which we added as part of the tender documentation. So this will be going out to tender, and hopefully we'll receive a BIM execution plan for this project as soon as that goes out. So we also we have already set up a common data environment for this. So we have a filing structure in BIM 360 already, so that we can efficiently share information when the project moves to the next stage. So what our projections are on this project is to basically monitor and measure the progress at every stage. That's from stage 4 to hand over, and also to have a more efficient operational and asset management experience, and also to be able to maximize the potential of 4D BIM and 5D BIM. So basically tying our scheduled data to a 3D model, and also extracting accurate cost information from a 3D model. And the project manager on this project is actually very excited about it. And the next project is the Brewery House on Ambrook Street. This project as well is on stage 4, and this is not a new build, it's a renovation project. And this building in itself is a very interesting one. It's in a conservation area in the southern part of Portsmouth, and it has changed use in the last few years. It used to be a brewery house, and at some point it became a firing range. And now, because of our demand for housing in the council, this is one of the properties we identified as a potential project that can be converted into housing. So we'll be having 17 flats in this building. And for this one too, we carried out a viability assessment on this project. And we also issued out an exchange information requirement to establish what information we need at the end of the project. And we also have a filing structure for it in BIM 360. And we are projecting that this project will be able to give us a better understanding of what a BIM process is like on a renovation project within the council. So this helps us to measure the progress, and we can learn from it and have a report at the end to the stakeholders and directors to see how we can measure the traditional way of working to a more digitized way of working. And the third project here is Tipner West, which is about one of the largest regeneration projects in the south. This will be providing the city with 4,000 homes. It's an ambitious project. It's got about 145 acres of marine employment, and it's quite massive, and it's a long-term project. But the good thing is we have managed to set this up in a 3D environment. And so when the project starts to grow, it's going to be done to BIM standards. And this project has earned us a nomination with the Construction Excellence Awards. And so what we've done so far is we issued an EIR, and we worked with one of the best architecture firms in the country to develop this model to concept stage. And so we shared the information in BIM 360. Everyone played a huge part in this, and they had a better understanding of what the project is all about. So this was our very first pilot project, and the whole idea of this project is to set an example for the city, and also to raise the profile of BIM within Portsmouth City Council. And we've laid a foundation for the smart city process for this development, because we believe it's just going to be a game changer, and it's going to change how people live, basically. And it gave us a better insight into how project teams can collaborate effectively. And the next project is a residential development as well, just outside of the island, and Cabbage Field Row. This is on stage 1 at the moment, and this is providing about 155 new homes, and we are hoping to document this to BIM standards as well. We've issued an EIR already, and we've received a pre-contract BIM execution plan. And another thing I missed out from the very beginning of talking about the projects we've done is, because most of our projects are on a design and build contract, so we've separated our EIRs into 2 parts. So we have the one that covers between the RIBA stage 0 to 3. Then we have one that covers from RIBA stage 4 to handover. So because at that point, at stage 4, at stage 3, we send out a tender documentation to nominate a contractor for the work. So that's why it's divided into 2 parts, and that's the point where we identify what we require for our asset information model. So what we basically do at this point is, when we don't get a chance to speak to the FM guys, what we do is we use our generic O&M manuals, which has a breakdown of what we require for the operational phase of the project. So we use that to develop our asset information requirement. And this project in itself too has to be monitored at every stage so we can learn from it. And it gives us a chance to be more efficient at the operational phase and management of the asset as well. And we are emphasizing on 4D and 5D optimization as well. And the last one that we've got is Edinburgh House. This is at RIBA stage 1 as well. And we have issued an EIR for this as well. And we have received a BIM execution plan from the architects so far. So we are about to initiate a BIM kickoff meeting for this before the BIM project moves to the next stage. So this is going to be providing about 62 new extra care flats just around the Cosham area. And this is the first of its kind in Portsmouth. And so most of our projections are generally the same. So we're just trying to set examples that BIM is a more efficient way of delivering our projects, and the process will be more important to our current culture of working in Portsmouth City Council. And in the last 2 years, we feel the future for us is basically using our working group to bring all the departments together, the departments within Portsmouth City Council. And this actually builds up into an ambassadors, BIM ambassadors awareness program where we can have people who are interested in BIM within every department in the council, and they take this to their various departments, and this can help us have a more robust understanding of what BIM is about without me having to do all of that. So it creates a network of BIM champions in every department. And this is not just going to end within Portsmouth City Council. We are also trying to take this out to engage more with contractors and the supply chain on our framework so that we can effect this change at a regional level. And this also ties into our corporate priorities, which is to help SMEs, because part of the problem is that we discussed in the working group is if we start to do all our projects to BIM level 2, and this is put into effect at the procurement level, that means some of the contractors on our framework that don't do BIM won't be able to bid for that project. So what we're thinking is, or what we plan to do basically, is to carry them along as we are growing in BIM. And this journey, we wouldn't have been able to come this far with BIM without the consultant that we got on board from the very beginning, holding us by the hand and helping us out in areas where we're struggling. And that has been very efficient so far. And the next steps for us for the future is basically to have our BIM ambassadors program in place, and that's an organization-wide adoption basically, and to keep upskilling the staff, and by having periodic capability assessment surveys and having a more team-focused training that will make everyone more efficient in their areas of endeavor, and also to efficiently engage with project team and stakeholders outside of Portsmouth City Council. And this would actually grow into making our in-house team more incorporated into how we work. And the next thing is create a more efficient asset management strategy. So our asset management team are very brilliant at the moment because we're a data-rich organization. What they do is very efficient at the moment, but all that is just missing is adding the graphical data to the amount of information they have and making the way the information is shared more structured. And so hopefully we're going to be able to accomplish that with the way we're going. And lastly, we are using our influence as a public sector organization to promote BIM in the Solent region. So in the next coming months, we're going to be having a BIM conference that brings together all the stakeholders, contractors, a few councils within the Solent region. And we're going to have like a strategy session and discuss the future of BIM in the region. And Portsmouth City Council is happy to lead on that. And that is the work we've been doing at PCC so far. And we're hoping everything's going to grow and be a lot better for us. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Femi. That was amazing. Really, really great. So thanks very much for your time. That's exactly what we needed to hear from a really major client in the South. Okay, so I'm just going to do a quick summary. It's been a really interesting three set of speakers that we've had today. So Dan's been talking about ISO 19650 and the requirements on clients and how they can break that down and make it a lot simpler than they possibly might have imagined. And a lot of that stuff is already existing in their organizations in the way they ask for information. So I think there is plenty of opportunity there to to start their digital journeys, I think. Keith discussed digital clients, digitalisation, what that looks like, and looked at some case studies, which I think was really helpful. Again, I think it's great that these are showing case studies which are in the southern region, which aren't London-centric. It shows that the BIM agenda, if you want to call it that, has filtered down across the regions, and there are projects and people and consultants and clients who are interested and engaged in this process. And I think talking about that strategic approach for them has been really good. And also touch on sort of future planning from Keith as well, thinking about what the next steps might be for them. And then finally, we had Femi talking about Portsmouth City Council's really ambitious programme. And I think it's a really exciting opportunity there of what's happening, looking at that strategic approach, and the roadmap, and how they have got live projects, about to go out to tender or soon to go out to tender, which will include the BIM requirements. And the Tipner project in particular, I think I'd really like to see how that progresses and hear more about that over the next coming years as that develops, to see what the benefits are and what the challenges have been with that process. And I also thought it was really interesting how he mentioned their brilliant asset management team and how they are using data, and actually with some simple amendments or additions to the way that they collect data, as in the graphical data, they could really have a great source of information for all of the assets that they have at the moment. And again, the conference that Femi has discussed at the end there, it would be really great to get more details on that, and we will share that as a Southern Group with our members. So if you're not on our member list, then please sign up, and we'll send out information on that for future events. So in terms of what's next for the group, we are planning an event in October, and following on from what we've done with ISO 19650 and then looking at clients today, we thought we'd focus on facility management at the next session and try and get some really good case studies for that. So if you're involved with that, or have got a good contact or a good team that you're working with who are pushing forward BIM and facilities management, then please get in touch. We would love to hear from them and have an opportunity to share that great work. But also, if you would like to speak yourselves, then let me know. But that's the aim for the next session in October, so we can kind of get over the summer and probably see where we are at that time, because we're obviously quite unsure about what's going to happen in the wider you know, the COVID sort of side of things up to that date. So I would like to just take this opportunity at this point to thank all of our speakers. We will have a Q&A session just after this, and I just need to check through the questions in a moment, but I would like to extend my thanks to Dan for his time today and the BSI for supporting this session, to Keith as well for going through his information and his consultancy role, and in particular to Femi as well, just to run through what I think is a really exciting development at Portsmouth City Council. So thanks to all of those, and thanks to all of you people who have attended today. I'm going to move us on to the Q&A session. So hopefully this will work. I might need a bit of support from Pam on this side of things. So we have got some questions here. I just need to expand them a bit. Simon has asked, I'd be interested to find out more about how VR can be used within the BIM models to help improve designs and also give feedback from the users, e.g. students in a university as we're researching these topics. So Keith, hopefully you might be able to help with that question.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, so I mean, we used it for the engagement with students as I went through in the case study there at Chichester, and I mean that worked really well. The purpose that client was interested in at that time was really because it was a new build that they felt the students really wouldn't appreciate what that building was going to be like beforehand. So I think what I would say is that if you are looking at VR or something along those kind of lines, the model has to be broken down in a slightly different way, and also consideration about things like the materialistic use of the modeling is quite important. Technology-wise, I mean, since we did the stuff at Chichester, now technology is now available. So things like the VR kits and so on are available to rent through various companies. So that's quite useful. And I would be conscious about the tethering that you have with those different bits of kit as well. So again, make sure you've got sort of space to be able to do it. I think it'd be interesting to know a bit more about. Sorry, was it Peter? You said. I can't see the questions on my.
Sorry, Simon. Sorry,
Simon. It would be interesting to know a bit more about what they're looking at, and I'll probably sort of try and advise a bit further. But yeah, the modelling is probably the biggest consideration to sort of beef up the modelling a bit more to make it so that in VR it does look good, because obviously general modelling doesn't necessarily include all of the finishes and that kind of thing, and signage particularly, and you know, just sort of general bits and pieces and around that obviously make the modelling look far more realistic. So.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. Okay, so Simon's also asked, I would be curious to know if he said from David, I'm not sure if he means Dan, I'm afraid, but if they already knew how they would manage all of the documents and information at the end of their projects. Was there a CAFM or another online tool used, and how will the information planning process consider the quality control of moving data into FM management systems? So I'm not sure, I mean, possibly that could go out to everyone, but would anyone like to talk a little bit about their experience with CAFM systems and integration with client requirements? I'm going to nominate Keith.
I can chip in.
Okay, thank you.
For us at Portsmouth City Council, we've got a purpose-built FM system that has a list of all the assets we've got, and it breaks it down to all the components, the type of building, maintainable components and non-maintainable components in the building. And so we use that to adequately manage what we've got. And the only issue we might have once in a while is how the information is dispersed. Say when somebody closes and needs to pass on information across, and that information didn't go across early enough, or they set up a system where some of the operatives don't use on a regular basis. So we have a very good system in place, and it's quite functional. And I'm sure once a graphical data or a kind of system that is a lot more complex is added on to the way we work at the moment, I think we'll be fine.
Okay,
So
fantastic.
that's it for me.
Okay. Richard Saxon has asked, Dan, why is 19650 Part 5 not free? It's a barrier to uptake. Thanks. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, you can give me a nice easy one, Alistair. Thank you. The it's the issue is complex. And I will butcher it down simply to the point that hopefully I can't be held to it. But the idea is that as part of curating ISO standards, there is a requirement on us as BSI to charge for those standards. And part of that is because there's obviously resource, time and money needed to maintain and look after the committees that manage and update these standards. So considering that, you know, there are review cycles for a lot of the standards, and that, you know, things like the BIM standards are quite popular, but there are also standards out there that are essential but don't have a wide audience. And if you think of, I'll make one up on the spot because I don't know, but an example could be a standard on how PPE equipment is specified or procured, because actually there aren't that many companies that make PPE equipment, especially, you know, on around medical devices, for example. So the fact that those standards, you know, it's still a cost to do it, but actually as part of some of those standards, they're not going to bring in the same level of revenue, but they are quite important. So because of that mix and balance, it's unfortunate that when standards come from ISO, it's done that way. So you'll notice that when we had the BIM level 2 stuff, at that time it was, and the term I'll use is free at point of use, because the standards weren't free. The government paid for the license to effectively buy a copy for everyone, is effectively what they had done essentially, so that those PASs and the BSs were free at point of use because they were paid for by UK government. Once they are an ISO that's brought down, that arrangement doesn't apply. So you'll see that things like BS 1192.4 and PAS 1192.3 are still freely available because of that license and arrangement. But any of the standards that are from ISO that come down, we have to charge for, because there's a need to ensure the quality of the committees and that things are maintained and continued, so that when there needs to be a revision, it can be done as part of that process. Because as opposed to some of the other documentation which might be sponsored, these are generated within the committees, so effectively need to maintain themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a very comprehensive answer. I hope that helps Richard with that question. It is a tricky area. It's not a simple one to resolve, as Dan has said. We haven't got any further questions here. If anyone would like to ask any questions while I wrap up, then please do. We'll do our best to answer. But I think that's probably a really good time to say thanks to everyone for attending. It's really great to have you here, and I will send out further information on today's talks, because it has been recorded, so we will share that, and that will go on the BIM South website. That's www.bimsouth.com, and I think it also go on the UKBIMA Alliance website as well, so you can access it through their YouTube channel. I'd like to thank all our speakers today, so Keith and Femi and Dan. It's been really great, so thanks for all your hard work putting together the slides and just preparing for that, because it takes a lot of effort to just, you know, prepare for these events, so I appreciate your time for that. And I will call it to a close there, so thanks for everyone attending, and hope to see you at the next event. Okay, thanks very much.